This video world, I'm SYED and you're watching Faultlines. Kenya's presidential elections have been concluded. William Ruto has been declared the winning candidate, though with a little margin. The success of William Ruto has brought a lot of jubilation in the country that is seriously upset with the economic shocks after COVID-19 as well as due to the war between Russia and Ukraine. Ruto has promised to bring the economic reforms at the forefront of his policies. But there is a problem with it. The opposition candidate, Mr. Odinga, who has a wonderful past in the Kenya's politics and remains to be a very important personality, is not accepting the results of the election. He has rather decided to knock at the doors of the court. When it comes to the post-election violence, Kenya unfortunately has got a checkered past. In 2007, when Kenya's elections were concluded, there were riots and a wave of violence that disrupted the entire country's political process. More than 1,000 people were killed. 600,000 lost their homes. And in 2017, the elections were undone. The results of the elections were not accepted by the court of law. So therefore, Kenya's economy and Kenya's politics is standing at a crossroads. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to the program.
William Ruto, who has been Kenya's deputy president since 2013, has won the race to be fifth president of Kenya, according to the results announced by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. The outcome shook up the East African nation's politics by appealing to struggling Kenyans' economic concerns instead of their ethnic allegiance, as Ruto's campaign focused on a bottom-up economic model to empower the people. Elections were held on the 9th of August with 22.1 million registered Kenyans eligible to elect the country's successor to the incumbent Uhuru Kenyatta. The Electoral Commission was widely praised for conducting a transparent process by posting on its website results from more than 46,000 polling stations and encouraging anyone to conduct their own tally. The Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga, who served as Kenya's Prime Minister from 2008 to 13, has pledged to challenge the outcome with all constitutional and legal options. The dramatic event followed by elections raised fears of violence such as that seen after previous disputed polls. In 2007, more than 100 people were killed after the Supreme Court overturned the result, citing anomalies in the voting process. A decade earlier, more than 1,200 people were killed in widespread violence after 2007 presidential vote.
Ladies and gentlemen, to join me on the first part of the program is Julius Buluto, a famous broadcast journalist and expert of African affairs, joining me from London. He's originally from Kenya. Julius, I welcome you to the program.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Julius, first things first. So, tell us about the country at large. What is Kenya? What exactly are the factors that affect its politics and economy? Can you give us a brief introduction of Kenya, particularly about the political system of the country?
Well, Kenya's politics has been very progressive, changing all the time. Of course, Kenya started with, after independence, having one single party state. So it was just one single party state. But of course, after clamor for multi-partyism, the system changed. And in 1992, Kenya embraced multi-party democracy, which meant more than one party was allowed to thrive in terms of politics. And of course, when you look into, since that time, Kenya also introduced devolution. Now, that meant Kenya has about 47 counties, and each county is governed by a governor. And then after the counties, then you have the national government, which is like for everybody. With that in mind, Kenya's politics has been very, very competitive. Like the last three general election has been extremely competitive. And it's just because Kenya, in terms of legal changes, constitutionality, has been extremely noisy, but the good thing is that Kenya has never, at any given time, embraced a full-fledged civil war because of politics, except, of course, for 2007 when there was post-election violence.
And Beluto, how about the economy of the country? How about the ethnic and economic snapshot that defines this country at large?
Yeah, sure. Kenya, a country in East Africa, is just a very strategically positioned in terms of, for many years, it has been the connecting point with the port at Mombasa, connecting to the Indian Ocean. Kenya happens to be a very important player in the region because many countries in East Africa, some of them are landlocked except for Tanzania and a bit of Somalia. But some countries which are landlocked, they found Kenya very useful because it is like the conduit to trade internationally. So we are talking about countries like Democratic Republic of Congo. When you come to the interior, you're talking about countries like Central Africa and connecting point. It's been very important in terms of trade, and geographically it also been being surrounded. The history of Kenya has been surrounded by countries that in one time or the other has been at war or civil war. I'll give you an example. Next door neighbor, Sudan, they fought, the country broke into two from Sudan now to transitional South Sudan. And the same thing with Ethiopia. Also the Ethiopia war in Ethiopia resulted in a country known as Eritrea being born, still next door to Kenya. Uganda, during the time of Idi Amin, also a lot of refugees coming into Kenya. And when we talk about Rwanda, Rwanda's war during the genocide, Rwanda is not far either. So Kenya, in terms of the importance of the regional importance, especially in East Africa, has been very, like the safe haven for many years, whereby it is the place that people fleeing war came into. And therefore it became also a very important player connecting to the international world, where Kenya has been a place where mediation, where peace processes have been brokered, whether it's talking about Somalia, whether it's talking about Uganda during that time. Kenya has been very important in peace for the region as well.
Beluto, why these elections were so important for Kenya?
When I look into Kenya's politicians, I say they are like mangoes from one tree. They may look different in shape or in color. Some are yellow when they are ripe, others are green when they're not ripe. There you go. So when you look in the landscape of Kenya, every politician, at one point they did work together all the time. I'll give you an example. The current two presidential candidate, Raila Odinga, former prime minister, William Ruto, who is a deputy president in the current regime. If you flash back 2007, they were both in the same party, Orange Democratic Movement. They were in that particular party. Raila Odinga, William Ruto, they were in ODM, the Orange Democratic Party, and that was 2007. If we are flashing back to go back to that background, you see, William Ruto at the time, he was so much in support of Raila Odinga, the current opponent right now. They were like, birds of a feather. He was so vocal defending the winning of Raila Odinga, which he was claiming was stolen. Of course, it was disputed election. And if you see how things have changed again now, you see, he went back to work with Uhuru Kenyatta, the current president. They were in the same party, and that was 2013 and also 2017. They were in the same party, Jubilee Party. Again, when you look into, also if you were to go further back, at some time, Uhuru Kenyatta was also in the opposition, in which case you find them in the same side with Raila Odinga.
So what you are trying to say is that it's not about the principles. Almost all the leaders of Kenya's politics have similar past. And the politics does not revolve around principles. It's rather revolving around personalities, if I understand this correctly.
They have different personalities. Current Prime Minister, in terms of his role in Kenya's politics, is the most transformative. He has sacrificed quite a lot. He's been detained many times by former regimes. In terms of him as a person, Raila Odinga is a statesman. Why do I say so? Look at it in like 2000 and before 2002, he had been detained by the former president, Daniel Arap Moi, and then he comes out of detentions, and then he reaches out to the former president, and they ended up working together. Him being a member of taking his own party, NDP, to work with the ruling party at the time, which was KANU, Kenya African National Reunion. So when you look into that dynamics, Raila Odinga is statesman. And when you look into the disputed disputed election of 2017, he reached out to the current president, Uhuru Kenyatta, and they had a handshake. And that handshake was very important for Kenya because the country was divided into two. And that, whether critics may like it or not, it brought peace back because the country was divided. William Ruto has come up with the narrative of hustler. And when you talk about hustler, he's talking about the common people. People are struggling. He purports to be belonging to that category of people. And he has managed to change politics in terms of Kenya, looking at himself and selling that narrative to a lot of people. And is he really a hustler? When you look into the history of everybody who is successful, they started from somewhere. Our founding father, Jomo Kenyatta, he used to read meters just as a job. Former president who came after him, he was a school teacher. So when we can today in 2022 begin to say, oh, I'm just like you because I was a chicken seller, that's not a narrative that should hold any water, because at the end of the day, a lot of people who are successful today, they started from somewhere, and that really doesn't mean anything in terms of politics. But it is that narrative that Ruto tried to play with, showcasing himself as an ordinary folk, people in the marketplace who sell bananas, selling them, I'm just like you. But today is not, because he's a billionaire with head choppers and all that. It's not someone who is struggling. It's not in that category, and he will never be. In terms also of being held hand in politics, he benefited quite a lot from the regime of former president Daniel Arap Moi. It is that regime that introduced him to politics. So in terms of political journey, he has mentored. He has been held his hand many times. But in 2022, he manages to categorize Kenyans into two, calling those who are in power, the kind of Raila Odinga, the current president, as dynasty. And why is he calling them dynasty? Because apparently the current president, his father was a founding father of the nation. The father of current Prime Minister or former Prime Minister Raila Odinga was the first Kenya's vice president.
But the 2007 elections of Kenya were very important. There was a great wave of violence that disrupted the political order of the country. More than 1,000 people lost their lives. 600,000 were uprooted from their houses. Tell us what had happened back then and why all of this fuss was created after the elections.
In 2007, Kenya conducted elections, and of course it was very, very heavily politicized, and in terms of the election, also the former electoral body at the time was also in a way divided and also politicized. So actually, not just to cut a long story short, before the post-election violence broke out, the former electoral chairman, Samuel Kivuitu was his name, he kept on waiting during the tallying of presidential votes. At the time, he kept on waiting for some of the returning officers. Some of them had disappeared, others had switched off their mobile phones, and just interference here and there by politics as well. And in the end, this guy raises up his hands. He told the country, I don't know who won. Now, the moment he said he didn't know who won, political temperatures were extremely high. And at that particular moment is when you saw the world witnessed. The electoral chair said he didn't know who won the election, yet like overnight, the former president Mwai Kibaki was sworn in as the president. So therefore, it was so murky way of managing the electoral process at the time. And I think that's exactly what triggered the violence. Because if he didn't know who won, how come then the former president was sworn in? And actually, I remember very well the former president being interviewed. He was like, did you really win? And then he was telling the country, I didn't say I won. I was told I won. So this is the background of the former, and disputed election in 2007.
But this is very small lead of 2%. The political opposition are saying a lot of things. They say they do not accept the results. They would rather challenge it in the court of law. What do you think of these accusations, and what do you think will happen next?
Kenyans in 2007 learned a lesson. They witnessed violence. Actually, it was the very first time as a nation Kenyans went through this. And it's like there's an unwritten agreement amongst Kenyans that they are not going to fight because of political elections and results and all that. I just want to say that if Kenyans were to fight because of election, 2017 gave them the opportunity to do so, because the country was immensely divided and political rhetoric was extremely divisive. So in terms of, even when you look back to 2017, which is last general election, which was nullified by the Supreme Court, Kenyans, ordinary folks, were saying, hey, all we can do is vote. You politicians, if you have a problem, if we are going to go back for another election, we are going to come and vote. But it stays there. Who is not happy? Go to court. And exactly that's what happens. I see this situation right now where we are. There's that kind of a dilemma, because of course, William Ruto was announced the winner, but then the opposition has gone. The opposing candidate is going to court to dispute that election. Kenyans now are back to work. Life is back to normal. They are leaving that to the Supreme Court to make a decision, and that decision, whatever court says, it will be holding. If we're going to go back for another election, we'll go back and vote. I don't see any violence.
I got it. But Bulutu, tell me about the winning candidate, William Ruto. Don't you think he will have to face a lot of serious challenges, particularly on the economic front, because the Kenya's economy, its outlook has not been very good since 2019 onward, and particularly the external debt have also risen sharply.
That is currently the main focus of Kenyans. When I speak to people on the ground, some of them are like, we really can't wait to see the next president. Why is that? Because they say, we are suffering because life has been very expensive. Food stuff has gone up, the price is also doubled up. And therefore, ordinary folks are like, we want a government, just like now. They can't wait to have a government in power. Why is a government important? Because it is that government that should sort the economic issues, that should maybe give subsidies to bring prices of commodities down, because a lot of folks are really struggling as I'm speaking to you right now. So William Ruto or Raila Odinga, whoever becomes president, their first priority will be, number one, to bring food commodities down. Whichever method they're going to use, if they're going to subsidize some foodstuffs, which is very important for the country people because of long term drought also, there's no food, enough food, also maybe consider to import more or that. So the government that's to go will immediately face that issue of, number one, making sure Kenyans foodstuff is lowered because it's very expensive beyond the reach of many. Number two, the economy as well will have to be fixed. But the most important thing with Kenya, a lot of Kenyans say there's lots of money in Kenya. We can depend on ourselves, but the problem has been corruption. So corruption will be a number one priority for any government that comes to power. The other thing about corruption, Kenyans are not like, we don't want the rhetoric, like we are going to fight corruption. We have seen many times people accused of corruption, they just get away with it because prosecution doesn't successfully put people behind bars when they should be put behind bars for corruption. So the next government that comes to Kenya, the priority will be fight corruption, not mere words, not rhetoric, but actually do it and be seen to do it. That's the thinking of ordinary Kenyans right now.
Thank you very much, Julius Baluta, for being guest in my program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with the second segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are going to talk about a country of West Africa. The country is named Mali. Mali is a former colony of France. The country is independent for quite long. But French army did not get out of Mali until last 6 months ago. And 6 months ago, when French army left, they were there for last consecutive 9 years. 9 years of French oppression, 9 years of French military trying to give strength to the government's forces. But now, since France have withdrawn its forces from there, the security of the country has slightly been given, or to some extent have been given, to Wagner Group from Russia. Now, Wagner Group's presence in Russia is a point of concern for many powers in Africa, or many countries in Africa. Also, the countries in the West are now afraid, or are increasingly concerned about the heavier footprint of Russia in the heart of Africa. Recently, a militant group has targeted 4 officials of Wagner Group. What is happening there? We will discuss with an expert who is going to tell us about the details of what is happening in Mali. And I have been joined by Claude Gatebuke, once again joining me from United States. He is an expert of African studies. Claude, I welcome you to the program again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Claude, will you give us a bit of brief of Mali before we start talking about the events that have upsetted Mali recently?
So Mali is, just to place it on the map, it's a country, one of the largest countries on the continent of Africa. It's actually in West Africa, so toward the north of the country. And it's as I said, a very large country, and its form of government currently is actually a military junta that has been in place since last year after a coup, which Mali has been rocked by multiple coups. The coup came on the heels of popular protest against a previously installed government that also came in through a coup. And the other piece of it is that Mali usually they have a president, they have parliament, and that's kind of the form of government that they have. However, like I say, today is a military junta that's leading the government, and there's an interim president named Assimi Goita. He's been there for a little bit over a year. And also, the other piece to it, in terms of the governance system in Mali and what they have right now, it's a transition government. So it's supposed to eventually hand over to the civilians and for there to be a democratic transition. However, there has not really been a democratically elected government in Mali since 2012, when a coup was carried out on the heels of a rebellion in the north of Mali.
So, am I right to say that, like many other struggling democracies of Africa, Mali also has an unnecessary involvement of Mali's military in the state of affairs of the government?
That's correct. And Mali is still struggling for that through that. However, for a while, Mali was actually a stable country, and for at least almost a couple of decades in terms of democracy and peaceful handover of power. But when the spark to this recent unrest in Mali started with the bombing of Libya, the invasion of Libya by NATO, and the removal of Muammar Gaddafi as the president of Libya, which basically created instability in the whole region. And many of the fighters who were actually well equipped trickled into the Sahel, the region called the Sahel, which is where Mali is located, and they went down into various countries, including Mali. That's when a rebellion was born with a group, an ethnic group known as the Tuareg, fighting against the government. At that time, that's when really Mali's problems, the current problems began. It was about 10 years ago, in 2012, when this rebellion started on the heels of the invasion of Libya. So what we are seeing today in Mali are the impacts and consequences of the violent removal of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya through a war and through bombings that basically has set off the whole region into instability.
All right, so what is the economic and ethnic snapshot of the country?
Yes, so there is actually a large ethnic group in Mali known as the Bambara. The Bambara are the dominant ethnic group in Mali, the largest by far, close to 50%, especially when you add them up with other subgroups that also belong to the Bambara. In addition to the Bambara, we have the Tuaregs that I talked about. There's the Fulanis, and there's a number of other ethnic groups, but most of the groups are minority groups in the country. For the most part, a lot of the population actually lives in the southern part of Mali, because the northern part of Mali is mostly the desert. There is some religious differences between the Muslims and the Christians, but for the most part, these conflicts that we have some are jihadist, some are ethnic, some are just simple rebellions against the government, and some are foreign government interferences within Mali. So there's a mixture of those. In terms of the economy, there are basically four main areas of the economy, which for the most part is agriculture based. There is some mining in Mali, gold especially, which is, West Africa is rich in gold, as you may possibly know. And then there is transport and infrastructure. But for the most part, that part is for local economy. And there's also, if you look back, Mali has a long history of being one of the greatest empires on the continent in yesteryears, not today, and has some of the major rivers, which are also a source of transport, international transport in the region, going through that country, because it is a very large country. So its economy is based on transportation, mining, agriculture, and a little bit on energy.
Now, with regards to the involvement of French army in the Sahel region, I'm sure Mali is not alone in these concerns. There are other countries where France has not completely disengaged her forces.
Yes, the French army went into Mali in 2013 to presumably support and help the government in Mali to shore up the security in the country and to secure the country against the rebels. However, and as you said, the Sahel is a region that has multiple countries, including Niger, and a couple other countries, and Burkina Faso for the most part. Those are the three biggest ones in the Sahel. And so when the French went there, they went to support an unpopular government, which is not unusual with foreign interference, and definitely not with the French. And there's also something called France Afrique. France Afrique is basically France's involvement in former colonies in on the continent. There are a couple other countries that you could say that are part of France Afrique, but for the most part, former French colonies, they have a currency that's French controlled. They depend on France very much. And so what the French military went to do was mostly to secure France Afrique versus securing Mali's security. And in recent years, the people in Mali and West Africa, especially French West Africa, have shown a resentment toward the French and a dislike, basically saying, they come in there and they're supporting dictators. They come in there and they're going after their own interest versus the stated goals of securing the people and bringing about security. So because of all these protests and everything, the French military began to withdraw. And now the government, led by Assimi Goïta, has actually ordered that the French troops leave Mali. And that's happened in recent times, including very recently, where I believe the last French troops left Mali. With that, so far right now, the Malian people are celebrating, and obviously it has not made a difference. The presence of the French has not made a difference in terms of securing the country, and their leaving has not made it any safer either, or has not made a big difference to where you could say there was actually a purpose for the French military being in Mali for the last 9 years.
And with regards to this Wagner group, its footprint is also increasing heavily in the heart of Africa. Mali, I'm sure, is not the only country where Wagner is present at the moment.
That seems to be the case. The Wagner group from Russia came into Mali at the end of last year. And today they are fighting alongside the Malian government troops to shore up the security. And of course, there was news yesterday that some mercenaries from the Wagner group were killed. But what it looks like is that, there's a saying that goes, no good deed goes unpunished. I think that Russia is also in there for their own interest, and they are wanting to exploit, Mali economically in place of the West, or in place of the French who have left. And of course, the Malian people are the ones who decided and say they did not want the French. But now the Malians are there. The Russians are there. And I think that, for one, when you hire mercenaries, you got to pay them. So they are getting paid. But in addition to that, I think that Russia's going to stay and want to exploit Mali economically.
Claude, what about this affiliate group of Al-Qaeda that have targeted Wagner Group? What exactly do you believe can be the motives behind it? How powerful these groups are?
I think this is going to continue to escalate in terms of the violence in Mali. The presence of the Al-Qaeda affiliates is definitely a big major concern in the region, in so much of the Sahel. And their presence itself is a threat to security. And I believe what it's gonna do, which is actually not the best way for, the best way forward, but I think it's gonna continue to militarize the region. The region is gonna go into more and more militarization, because what it looks like, what I've seen, is the response to these groups has always been more and more military. That was a part of why the French were in Mali. At least that's what they stated they were there for. That is a part of why the Wagner Group is in Mali. And I believe that that is going to provide a pretext for those foreign interventions to actually remain and exploit the country. Even when they're gone, they might still stay there, or even when these groups have been basically are no longer effective. I believe the foreign interference will continue under the pretext that they're protecting Mali and these other countries from Al-Qaeda.
Thank you very much, Claude Gate-Buke, for being guest in our program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, be it Mali or Kenya, the continent of Africa is still struggling to come out of the economic crisis. And these economic crises are not only reshaping the politics of the continent, but is also affecting the people living in this continent at large. And this will continue to be the case unless the problems of the food security are not solved. We'll join you tomorrow again with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.